Welcome to the channel. In this video, we get to tour the Blue Spruce manufacturing plant and see how they make their saws and their chisels. Now, if you follow the channel, you know that I have been becoming more and more obsessed with Blue Spruce products, so I wanted to see the plant and they invited me over and actually let me record the process. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first place we have to start is the saws, more specifically the saw handle. So they start with random material like we do if we were going to build our own projects. And then what they do is they have people come in on the weekends into this area of the shop and mill everything. And the reason that's done on the weekends is because they don't want all of this dust getting into places that it shouldn't be. So mill it on the weekends, let the dust settle, and then they continue the process. For the resin infusing, it goes into vats like this, and it goes in there for about 2 weeks or until the bubbles stop rising to the top. Once the bubbles stop, they turn off the vacuums and they let them sit for an additional 2 weeks. So this process takes a month, but I guarantee you it's well worth it because when they resin infuse things, it doubles its weight and density, which makes it more durable, makes it last longer. It also adds to some of the weight to help the balance out with some of their tools. So I am very happy that they take the time to do this. Now, the metal that you see on top is just some weights to prevent the material from floating up. The next step is the handles go to their CNC machine. Now, this CNC machine was actually really impressive because it can do 6 handles at once in 3 different operations. So the first one is they put the blank on there and it cuts out a lot of the material on one side. The next operation is they flip that blank over and cut out the rest of the material where you can see the outline of the handle. The operator of the machine then cuts the 2 tabs so the handles are removed from the blank. Then they are placed upright where the machine goes in and cuts the slot for the spine. So I just thought that this was really cool that essentially they can work on 6 handles and just keep flipping them through the operations until they're done. The next step is sanding, and the guy that they have sanding their handles was awesome. What? I'm sorry?
I said I didn't do my hair today.
That's a good one. He was super chill. He was really cool. So I'm going to let him explain this next process.
In from the CNC, they come in like this. So they get broken out of the 2 tabs in the stock, and then it comes over here on the belt sander. The 2 tabs come off. And then the sanding starts.
In case you missed it, I just want to point out that he does all of this sanding by hand. He sands until all of the mill marks are gone and everything is perfectly smooth, and I just think that is super impressive. To cut the slot in the handle for the blade, Jared came up with this really cool sled that goes onto the bandsaw, holds the handle exactly where it needs to be, and then you just slide the handle and the sled into the blade, it cuts your slot, and you're good to go. I thought that was really impressive. The next step is onto the actual blade. So the first thing they do is they put it into this etching machine. Now it has these different pins in this jig. So depending on the length of the plate, they can just set it in there. So then that way the etch comes out in the same place on every single saw that they do. After it is etched, it goes into a CNC machine that actually cuts the teeth. Now let me explain something about that real quick. When it comes to a saw, precision, accuracy, and consistency are highly important. If it's not accurate or consistent, then you're going to have a weird cut. The old Foley and Acme sharpening machines, that's one of the reasons they were so popular back in the day, because they could get consistent and accurate results. The only problem with them is they take a lot of time to set up and they're tough to maintain. So that's why this CNC machine does a phenomenal job, because it is accurate and consistent across the length of the plate and on multiple saw plates. Now, right now, if you notice, they're only able to do 1 saw plate at a time because that CBN wheel is at a fixed angle. So what they have to do is they have to adjust the jig that holds the plate and set that at different angles to create the bevel angles. So they'll move it to one side, run the operation, switch it to the other angle, run the other operation. If they tried to do multiple saw plates at the same time, that stack up effect would create wildly different angles for the saws at the end of the stack versus the saws in the middle of the stack. Now, he does have a solution for this coming up soon to increase the production time by having the CBN wheel actually shift angle and keep the saws at 90 degrees. And then he also made it so the CBN wheels can cut 2 teeth at once. So I'm super excited for that because it is going to drastically change the amount of saws that they can do at one time. A little note on the CBN wheels, just because I was curious too. This is what the CBN wheels look like, and they can get on average about 60 saws completed per CBN wheel. Now, at the corners or the points of the CBN wheel, that's what wears the fastest, because that is what's doing most of the cutting in cutting the gullets. And the gullets on these saws are wildly important. You don't want to have one deep gullet and one shallow gullet. It just creates issues. So that's the part of the CBN wheel that wears the fastest. But again, they can still get about 60 saws per wheel, which is pretty good. I got to give a huge shout out to the guy that is currently showing us this operation. He's also the guy that showed us how the handles were cut in the other CNC machine. He was an awesome guy, super down to earth, explained things really well. The only issue I ran into is that we were surrounded by a bunch of machines, and no matter how much editing I did, I couldn't get his audio to come out clearly. So unfortunately, you have to hear my voice and hear me explaining things, but huge shout out to him. He was awesome. So once they take the plates out of this CNC machine, in the cutting operation, burrs can be created on the sides of the plates. So he takes this block, and this block is what we use to clean sandpaper. I can't remember what it's called, but we all know what it is, and he just uses that to remove the burrs from the sides of the teeth. After that, he then takes it under this scope to inspect the teeth and make sure that everything looks good, everything looks the same. On that note, Blue Spruce had a huge, they're dedicated to quality control. At every single station I was at, quality control was occurring, and that to me is amazing. I love that part of it. Once he checks the teeth that way, he then stands the plate up on its back to inspect the teeth from looking down on top of them. And the reason he does that is because these bevel angles are so small, he has to see which tooth needs to be set which direction, because you want to make sure those line up. If they're backwards, you're going to have a lot of issues with the saw. So he uses the scope, finds out which tooth to set, and then he goes over to the setting machine. I don't know what it's called. Hammer set. I think that's what it's called.
Why is it in a box? Because this is also very loud, and the maintenance team decided that they wanted to make me a DJ, give me a DJ booth.
That machine was pretty loud, so I'm going to give you guys a little sample. After the teeth are set, the plate is ready for final assembly, but before that, let's talk about the spines, and I'm going to let Jared do that.
Clean from the mill, and we'll show you the machine, but they've been professionally flattened and leveled. It de-stresses the material completely so that it can actually be truly flat. We usually work to a tolerance of 4 to 5 thousandths across the entire length. Nice. From there, it gets milled, and then it comes down here, it gets tensioned. From there, it goes back out again for black nitride, then comes back in for final assembly. But these are one of the most labor-intensive components that we do in saws.
Now that we have the handle, the plate, and the spine all ready to go, the saw is ready to be assembled. So the first thing that he does here is he cuts out the different shapes and designs that are on the plate itself. After that, he takes it over to the file. Anytime you cut metal, especially spring steel, it likes to create sharp edges or burrs. So what he's doing is he's removing those and rounding them over, and then just making sure that everything looks good and straight on the edges. And then that way we don't cut ourselves also. After that, he is going to put some tape over the plate. And the reason he needs to tape it is because that plate is going to be put in a vise, and you want to make sure that it's not going to get scratched. He's going to use the file again. My understanding is that he is making sure that the top of the plate is flat, so that way it seats better into the spine, and then also probably to remove some burrs. What he's doing here is another step in their quality control. So he is taking a feeler gauge and checking the opening on the spine to make sure that it is even across the length. If it's not even, that means that you could get some heavier clamping pressure on one side and less on the other. That can create some issues within the plate. It can create some warping, some bowing, that kind of stuff. So he's just making sure that everything is even, so that way when he does put the spine on, it gives even clamping pressure across the length of the plate. Next is putting the handle on the plate, and the first thing that he does is he puts the handle on the plate to mark out where he needs to punch the holes for the hardware. Now this surprised me because I thought he was going to grab a drill and drill out the plate, but Jared was telling me that the heat of the drill bit can cause issues on the plate as well, so they actually use a punch to punch out these holes. On that note, I was impressed by how much of this is actually done by hand. I really expected most of this to be done by machines, but they still have a lot of people putting their hands on these tools and getting them together and getting them perfect for us. So again, I just thought that that was pretty neat, because when I think of like assembly lines and plants, I think of all machines now, but that's not the case here. Then once he gets the hardware into place, we have a finished saw, and the very next step that he does is something that I tell people to do all the time, which is once you get a new saw, cut full depth with it, because that will tell you if you have any issues with the saw. And with this one, he didn't have any issues and it came out perfect. Now on to my next favorite tool, the chisels.
Tate, what do you start with here?
I start with the blade, and I end up with this.
So this is another really cool machine that I believe they call the 3-axis machines, because it actually rotates and moves around, but it can do 3 operations in the same process. So the first one is they bevel the side of the chisel and then start cutting out the tang. The second operation is the other side. So they cut the bevel on the other side of the chisel and then finish out the tang. Now, if you notice, this chisel does not have a cutting edge. So the third operation is making the primary bevel on the chisel. Next, they go to the grinder, and this is one machine that I would love to have in my shop, because what it does is it grinds the tops and the bottoms of the chisel flat, so you don't have to do it yourself. The last 2 steps are the backs get polished in this really interesting machine, which I would also like to have. And then they all get hand cleaned and hand sharpened by this lady right here. So huge shout out to her. Now on to the handles, which are also resin infused like we discussed earlier. So they take this square stock and put it through this crazy, terrifying machine that I did not want to get super close, but basically you put square stock into it, it uses these gigantic cutters and comes out round. So that way they can use it in their CNC lathes. Here is the first CNC lathe, and what it does is it shapes out the handle part of the chisel handle. So you are left with something like this. And then the second lathe actually cuts out where the ferrule is going to go and then drills the hole for the tang, leaving you with something like this. And then from there, it goes on to sanding and polishing, which is where you see the final results of these beautiful chisel handles. It is all assembled and put together and then ready for shipping. So if you couldn't tell, this was a huge geek out moment for me. I loved every bit of this trip, getting to see the manufacturing buildings, getting to meet the workers. It was just an amazing, amazing experience. Like I said, I have been becoming more and more obsessed with their products because of the quality and the performance of them. But then to get to meet the workers and see that they're all like really chill and down to earth, and they're cracking jokes with us, and they like their jobs. Like even the guy that sands all day was talking about how much he enjoys his job and that nobody else understands it. And he's right, because I don't, but it's just great to hear that the people making these products that I love are also cool people. So it was just awesome. I don't know what else to say about it. Keep an eye out, because I will be doing a video of the woodpeckers plant so you can see the big machines and stuff that they have there as well, because I also got to tour that facility. And if you want to see the whole trip that I took, so I went to a place called Colonial Homestead, which will have a video on that. I went to visit my friend David, then we did the plant tour the next day. If you want to see all of that, feel free to check out my Patreon, because it was just a full-on like geek out trip, the entire thing. All right, so if you have any questions, any comments, anything like that, feel free to let us know. Make sure you stick around for some bonus footage at the end, and then huge shout out to Blue Spruce. Thank you again for letting me visit your plant and just like crash the party for a while. All right, thank you guys. Have a good day. Oh, that was perfect.
Well, are you looking at this little psycho?
Yeah.
You are too hyper. I know.
There's a lot of work that goes into assembling on this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, jeez. Not a good start.
There you go. Yes.
Sliver.
What's up? I
just have to show.
I have no idea.
Look at that. That's awesome.
I want to see the guy in action.
The Acme,
Yeah.
that thing is sweet.